All right, good afternoon. I'm going to call this special meeting, 4 o'clock special meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call roll?
Councilmember Dynas.
Here.
Councilmember Diedrich.
Here.
Councilmember Temple. Acting Mayor Carwin.
Here.
And Mayor Estrada is absent.
Thank you. Councilmember Dynas, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You haven't lost your touch. All right, we've got one discussion item on our special agenda today, a Public Safety Services Community Facilities District. Director Hickey, would you please introduce the item?
Okay, good afternoon, Acting Mayor, members of the City Council, City staff. I'm Travis Hickey, CFO of the city, and it's my pleasure to be here today to present the first portion of the workshop for the consideration of a Public Safety Community Facilities District, or CFD. I would like to thank the Executive Office, including the City Manager, for their time and leadership in the overall direction of this project. I also want to thank Spicer Consulting Group, Deputy Finance Director Margarita Cornejo, and Financial Analyst Lori Lockwood for their tremendous efforts to bring this all together. Do we have the slides available? Okay. So in every project or program the city initiates, the foundation starts with the 5 strategic goals and priorities of our strategic plan. The proposal for the Public Safety CFD really revolves around the goals and priorities of the thriving economy and the safe and vibrant community. Overriding principles of the thriving economy involve planning for long-term sustainability and diversifying the city's revenue sources. For the safe and vibrant community, this involves maintaining the city as one of the safest cities where residents and visitors are secure in their neighborhoods and surrounding spaces. So before we look closer at these priorities, I wanted to go back to some information that we provided to the City Council a month ago at the joint meeting with the Planning Commission provided on December 17th of last year. I know the slides are a little bit small, but it's just more kind of for context and a reminder of what we talked about. Here we see some of the slides from the presentation provided by Urban 3 as part of their revenue per acre analysis. In the upper left, we see the graphical representation of the city's general fund and quality of life budgets totaling $100 million. On the left side in green, we see the various revenue streams with the 2 largest unrestricted sources being sales tax and property taxes totaling $59 million. Another $31 million is generated from licenses, permits, and fees, where much of that is charges for services and covers the cost of those services. So the vast majority of funding to pay for things like public safety comes largely from sales tax and property tax. On the right side in red, we see the expenditures with public safety accounting for $56 million, or nearly all of the property tax and sales tax. In that upper right quadrant, we see an analysis of the impact that Prop 13 has on the value of property taxes in California. Prop 13 protects homeowners from property taxes not escalating more than 2% per year. However, that's regardless of how the cost of city services increases. Property tax values are reset every time a property is sold, creating a major variance in the property taxes one homeowner pays for services relative to other homeowners based on how long they have owned the property. You can see an example in the chart where the value per acre is significantly different for various homes in the same neighborhood based on the year of purchase. On the lower right, we see the impact that CFDs have made to diversify the city's revenue streams and somewhat counteract the impact of Prop 13 on the base property taxes. Those neighborhoods with service CFDs are represented with green layers on their parcels and provide ongoing revenue to provide needed services to those developments, including street maintenance, landscape maintenance, traffic signal maintenance, and more. Shifting back to the city's strategic plan objective of supporting long-term sustainability, we see here the many needs and challenges facing the city. We have needs for new and existing infrastructure, including ongoing pavement management activities, a $1 billion 5-year capital improvement program, and new public facilities for virtually all of our functional areas, including City Hall, Police Department headquarters, Public Works Maintenance Operations Center, and a community center. In our parks and recreational amenities and service areas, we have expanded programming, including the introduction of an aquatic program, the acquisition of additional open space, accepted new parks from ongoing development, and are pursuing an annexation process to transfer control of the parks and right-of-way currently operated by the Valley-wide Park and Recreation District. In building a fiscally resilient and strong city, the city remains committed to proactively managing the unfunded costs of the city's pension and OPEB liabilities and establishing healthy reserves for both emergencies and planned uses such as ongoing capital outlay needs. And with all of these competing priorities, the city still holds public safety within Menifee as a top priority, including supporting equipment and ever-changing technology to support public safety needs. So with all of these needs comes pressure to build and diversify the city's revenue base and provide the funding to make Menifee a premier, safe, thriving, and inclusive city to live, work, play, and stay. So the city has done a tremendous job in diversifying our revenue streams. Regular citywide user fees and development impact fee updates keep revenues up to date with changes in development, costs of infrastructure and services, and changes in the economy. Negotiating various community benefit agreements has been a welcome relief in recent times with the economy leveling off. The agreement with Nova Battery Park generated a $5 million CBA, along with a $1 million contribution towards the RBBD, along with additional one-time sales tax for the cost of materials used in the construction of their site, totaling over $15 million in the past 2 years. Had it not been for this one-time sales tax money last fiscal year, the city would have fallen short of budget projections. The city has also restructured its investment portfolio to maximize investment returns while also keeping the city's treasury safe and liquid. We are looking at multiple years in a row with investment earnings outpacing budget expectations. We also have a very active economic development program, including the use of incentives to attract new businesses to the community, which will drive growth in sales tax, quality of life funds, property taxes, transient occupancy taxes, and franchise fees. Since the voters approved the enactment of the quality of life measure, the city has remained committed to using the funds exclusively for public safety and infrastructure improvements. Regular meetings with the Quality of Life Committee ensure that the public is vetting the use of these funds before they are presented to the City Council for use. However, with all of these efforts, it is still necessary to prioritize a strategy further diversify revenue streams in support of ongoing services and infrastructure needs. So this brings us to our topic for today, a Public Safety Services CFD. A Public Safety Services CFD is a legally defensible and sustainable mechanism to ensure that new development contributes its fair share towards the increased cost of public safety. I think the key here is to focus on the word increased. This is not a CFD to pay for existing service levels. This would be to pay for increased levels of services that are required because new development is coming into the city. To say it another way, it's a mechanism to ensure that service levels do not decline to existing residents and business owners within the city. Shane will cover more specifics in a moment, but I want to mention that with new development, most residential parcels are paying property taxes at a rate of nearly 2%. This CFD would not change that rate. It would not add an additional tax to those owners. If the CFD does not move forward, the tax rate would still be up to 2%, but more funding would be made available to the developer of the project to be reimbursed for the cost of facilities and fees connected to the project. It is true that the developer reimbursements would be paid off after 30 years when the bonds are paid off. However, we should also keep in mind that the need for those public safety services will not go away, and that the fees connected to those properties only represent the incremental cost of those services due to the development coming into the city. The city had started the process of forming a public safety CFD back in 2015. However, the city council at the time chose not to move forward with the formation. Since 2015, many thousands of housing units have come to the city representing several $million that the city would otherwise be receiving now. Development continues, and if we act now, we can at least capture the remaining units yet to be developed to recoup that incremental cost for that growth. In June of 2025, the City Council asked about a public safety CFD. At that time, the city engaged Spicer Consulting Group to perform a fiscal impact analysis for a potential CFD. In September of 2025, staff reviewed the results of the analysis with the Finance Committee, which recommended the item be brought forward to the full City Council for review and discussion. At this time, I'll turn it over to Shane Spicer from Spicer Consulting Group to cover the results of the fiscal impact analysis and provide specifics of what a potential public safety CFD would look like.
Thank you very much, Travis. So I'll cover a high-level overview of the fiscal impact analysis and how does that translate into a proposed CFD structure. So as was mentioned in 2015, actually I was here doing the initial analysis, and so it's funny, 10 years later, here we are again having the same conversation, but much critical conversation needed. So as Travis had mentioned, the city is expecting a consistent level of development, and consistent with the city's development impact fee analysis that was approved in 2022, that's estimated that at 2045, population would grow up to 148,000. At the time of our study, that's an increase of about 32,700 new residents to the city. Using the city's current budget and service levels as a baseline, the analysis evaluates what it cost would be for ongoing general fund services to these new residents through development. Through this analysis, it anticipated that revenues for new development for residential would be approximately $41.2 million. The general fund service costs for that same new development is estimated to be at $47 million. That new cost increase would consist of the addition of additional public safety service personnel to provide those additional services to that community. Between the revenues and the general fund service costs, the estimated negative general fund impact is $5.8 million a year. And that majority of these service costs, as you well know, is with public safety. The city's general fund estimates about 60% of those expenditures for public safety. That is consistent up and down the state, and with all the other local communities that I do business with, it is very common to have that be a greater share of those costs. These public safety costs include police, fire, animal control. Of that 60% expenditure and the shortfall, that estimates to about $179 per resident, which translates to the rates I'll cover in a minute. So with CFDs, CFDs to provide public safety services is not a new idea. Obviously, we talked about it 10 years ago, and they've been implemented. I've seen some as far back as 2005. So for over 20 years, even though the law's been around for longer than that, they've been readily used for public safety. So it's not a novel concept. For this CFD, the proposed rate would be $525 per unit for single-family residents and $411 per unit for multifamily. It's important to note that this is similar to the maintenance services CFD, so this is only on new development. So the existing community is not expected to pay these CFD taxes. It is also important to note that with the CFD tax being established with the CFD, There would be an escalator included. You know, in the maintenance services CFD 2017-1, we have the greater of CPI or 2%, but public safety costs increase at a much greater rate than CPI does. And so the proposed CPI, as with other public safety CFDs, tend to be greater. Proposed here is the greater of CPI or 4%. Now that is the maximum tax rate. It is up to the council of what amount to be levied annually for this public safety CFD, or what percent of increase up to the maximum allowable can be applied each year. And as Travis mentioned, this does not change or modify the 2% effective tax rate that's already been adopted through the city's CFD goals and policies. And again, that 2%, just to recap, is based on the estimated home price at the time the properties are developed, and up to 2% of that home value. With public safety CFDs, they are an order of highest priority when it comes to determining that. So what that means is that you have the base 1% ad valorem, you have your maintenance or public safety CFD, and then the balance is what would be eligible for facility financing, if so asked by the developer. So how does that compare to the region? So there are quite a few CFDs in Riverside County. The proposed rate of $525 is actually below the region, county average of $605 per single family. There's a wide range of rates in the county, ranging from $257 for the city of Hemet up through over $1,500 for the city of Coachella. Each rate varies depending on when they were formed, and also based on the mechanics of the general fund that the cities operate under. I can't attest to some of these CFD tax rates and how they were determined, but I can tell you about a number of them as I've formed these with these cities. Most recently, just last year with the city of Marietta. So one of the takeaways is that this tax rate is not an outlier. It falls well within the range of those CFDs that are in the county and wholly acceptable for this type of CFD. And with that, I'll turn it back to Travis.
Great, thank you, Shane. So if the council would like to move forward, the city would start communicating with developers that there is an intention to create a public safety CFD. For new projects, this would be a new condition of approval for the project. We would also communicate with existing projects that have not finalized their conditions and would negotiate with existing projects on their conditions of with development agreements to attempt to incorporate the CFD. The actual formation of the CFD would happen concurrently with the cornerstone development, starting with the Finance Committee before being brought to the City Council for formation. Once the CFD is formed, future projects would be annexed into the CFD, much in the manner projects are annexed into the existing maintenance CFD. So the city would perform regular updates to the fees based on updated growth projections, which could result in establishing a newer or updated public safety CFD in the future. So the recommended action is to discuss and provide direction on establishing a public safety CFD to help fund essential city services for new development projects. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Hickey. At this time, the City Council is welcome to ask questions of staff. Again, this isn't for discussion, it's just technical questions of staff. So do we have any questions based on the presentation? Councilmember Dinas?
Thank you. So your projections for full build out, if everything's built out, the 500 and whatever dollars it was for the single family homes would continue to go on until the house is no longer there, I guess, forever. Yep. So I guess the question is, there's some way, will there ever be a time where as we grow in our retail and, we have TOTs, taxes that, with the hotels coming in, so all that's taken into account, and we would, on an ongoing basis, we'd be short that much money ongoing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so this is based on the current budget structure. And both the revenues and expenditures were escalated consistent with what would be conservative growth recognition. This is not, this is not something that is going to be the answer forever. It may need to be updated to be increased, or it could be evaluated that, okay, the city has taken on a lot more commercial development and we don't have to levy as much, which has happened in other cities where you don't levy the maximum amount. You're able to cover more costs because you had a better performance through your general fund activities. So this is to protect the city's general fund to the best of its ability with the current structure of the general fund.
So this will not include any of the construction that's going on today? The homes are being built now, nothing that's in the pipeline for approvals and everything?
Yeah, so the typical approach is to identify what would be the next project to come in. We need one project to be the cornerstone to form the CFD. Typically, if projects are already underway, they're not likely to, opt in. At that point, it would be voluntary because that project is already, through its conditions and is not required to be included. You may find a project that may be already entitled that would want to participate, and it'd be a negotiated discussion with the property owner and the city, so it's a business decision at that point, and then future development would automatically be conditioned to participate along with all other residential development.
And is it correct that then all the special taxes collected for the CFD would be restricted to public safety use only?
Correct. It is only limited to the public safety services, not towards capital improvements or anything of that sort.
Okay, that's my questions. Thanks.
All right. Council members, any questions from down here? Councilmember Diedrich?
Councilmember Dynas took my first question, but my second one, it's capped at 2%, right? So I know there's the 4% increase that's allowed each year. How does that balance?
So the tax rate is going to be at 525, and then every year the maximum tax would be the greater of CPI or 4%. So that would just increase the ceiling on that CFD tax. How does that play into the 2% we were talking about? Again, this is the difference between the tax and the effective tax rate. So the effective tax rate is capped at 2%, and that's per the city's goals and policies. So what that means is that when the home owner, the developer, goes to sell his home, after he factors in all the ad valorem, the public safety, CFD, the maintenance, then he can only go up to that 2%. So they're different. These are two different items.
That's at the initial sale.
That's at the initial sale. And then after the initial sale, then if there's bonds, those taxes would be levied. And then the public safety services and maintenance services, everything would be levied, but established at that 2% at the onset.
Okay, thank you.
I got a couple questions. So there was, you had mentioned that developers who are currently in the works could opt in on a voluntary basis. Why would they do that?
They might have some business incentive to do so. Typically, though, once they're already under construction, they've already done all of their pro forma, they've already secured their financing. It is highly unlikely that any development. Now, you may have phased developments that you could have a later phase be potentially eligible to come in, but then, that's it. It's not typical that you would find somebody that's already in process.
So one thing that you mentioned, I didn't see a slide for here, but you said if we don't do this, there's a developer payment that gets done that would sunset in 30 years. Explain that language to me. What is it that would be paid out that would sunset in 30 years?
That would be the facilities tax. So what currently is in existence is that you have a 2% effective tax rate, all right? And the developer forms a facility CFD, and one of our CFDs that we've formed. That facility CFD is secured to pay off a 30-year bond. So in reality, in 30 years, that CFD would go away. Okay. The problem is that once in the current environment, the only other revenue source the city actually gets currently would be the maintenance services for ongoing maintenance. No public safety taxes for above and beyond. Having the public safety CFD would cut into that 30-year tax that the developer would be getting, but the city would be able to continue to levy that public safety tax for perpetuity to provide those vital services even once the bonds are paid off. So
does this take the place of that bond, or does it pick up after the bond is paid off?
it cuts into how much of the bond can be issued.
I see. So what we're going to see is over the next 30 years, the impact of the new development would be felt by the city, and after 30 years, that impact would continue, but the payment for it would not. Is that basically what's going on here? If we were to not institute this?
Correct. If you did not institute this, then you would not be recouping those increased service costs for public safety even after the bond is paid off.
I see. And then, is there a definition in the law surrounding this of new development? At what point it would begin? Is it on occupancy? Is it on?
Yeah. So similar to our maintenance services CFDs, what we typically do is based on only developed property after building permits are issued. So there would be a similar annual administration component of reviewing new development, and if there's a building permit that it made the cutoff for that tax year, then they would end up paying towards that CFD. If the building permit was after that cutoff, whatever we define May 1st, then it wouldn't be picked up until the following year. But it's only new development. This would not be levied on undeveloped property. The developers wouldn't be paying this. It would be new homeowners and developed property that are pursuant to the rate and method that we would be establishing when we bring that back to the council for approval.
And who does the payment go to?
So the payment would go to the county and then remitted to the city as other apportionment of funds for a specific fund number that'd be designated for public safety, restricted from the general fund.
So in that path, do we end up back with 100% of the assessed amount, or does the county keep a portion of it on the way through?
There's a 30-cent charge for putting it on the tax roll, but you know, if there's delinquencies, obviously that wouldn't come back to the city, but it would be essentially 100% of what gets enrolled comes back for public safety.
So of the $525, the county would just keep 30 cents of it, and then the rest would come here.
Pretty much.
So they can't stop it along the way and divert it to their own funds. They're just mainly a pass-through.
Absolutely not. And we be bringing this back to the council like all the other CFDs for annual review and approval and the resolution that we would need in order to submit to the tax roll.
In all of the cities that you have seen institute one of these, have there been any ever that have reduced or eliminated it?
Well, reduced in the, okay, for example, you know.
Like, for example, I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe it'll help you answer your question. If in 15 years, Hahn Road is fully built out with economic development, and that's just cranking tax revenue for something like that, and it would cover the cost of the public services, do we just keep taking it anyway, or is there a way for us to go, hey, we got it covered, like the Coronado Bridge, hey, we got it covered, we don't need to charge you for it anymore?
Yeah, so when through the annual audit budget review process, that's when you evaluate how much are you getting from all your discretionary funds, or how much are you getting from your restricted funds, and evaluate how much public safety costs are. I can tell you that I have seen instances where a city had froze the maximum amount and didn't increase the assessment for a couple of years. And in one instance, because if you recall, there was a CPI at over 10%. Well, they didn't go to the 10%. They said, okay, we're good, we'll levy the same amount we did last year, and they did that for a couple of years, and then they just started incrementally increasing just recently. So you could, every 3 to 5 years, or I would recommend anytime you update your development impact fee, your general plan, or what have you, that we would reevaluate the public safety fiscal impact analysis, determine are you right size on new development for public safety services, and that can also factor into how you're evaluating your annual levies for your existing CFD tax rates for public safety.
Would this payment be part of the impound on the mortgages, or is it a separate cash issuance? Like, is it just a bill that the homeowner would pay, or is it rolled into the mortgage?
It's part of the property tax bill. So it's a completely separate line item, completely separate from any, property tax line items, and not part. It could be impounded, just like their other property taxes, but it just funneled through the county like your other assessments.
Okay, so it would be possible to include it in the impound with the other taxes that are being,
It would be, yeah, exactly. In fact, they would be if they're impounding.
right, that's what I was suspecting, all right. Those are all my questions. Council members, any other questions before we move on? All right. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak on this item, or has any correspondence been received on this item?
There are none.
All right. So at this time is when we get to discuss our feelings and thoughts on this stuff and analyze what we've just been told. So would anybody like to chime in on it?
I'll start.
Thank you.
All eyes are on me here for a second here.
Well, you're the finance guy, so that's why we're all looking your way.
A couple things. Yeah, I understand, public safety is, our highest priority here. And we want to continue to make that so and, continue to be one of the safest cities in the state. So I understand where we're going there. I'm a little conflicted. We're putting the burden on our new residents, but their new residents are the ones that are going to cause the increase. As we add these things, it keeps shooting up the price of homes. That's one of my part I'm concerned on. But for the greater good, I understand why we need to do it.
Can I ask you, to that point, you were here in 2015 when this was discussed, right? You were on council in 2015, right? No? You weren't here then?
I was 2018.
2018. Okay, then I'll ask him when you're done. I was going to ask you. But.
Okay. I can make up something. So and my concern is, the greater of CPI or 4%. Your example was, well, got to 10%, so they decided not to do that. But there's nothing saying that a future council can't say, hey, we're going to do the whole 10%, just regardless of what well, benefits the residents or not. That's my largest concern of doing that, and if there could be some mechanism in this to say, what I know it'll be looked at annually and reevaluated, but some way that that after that each year we need to be able to either reduce it, eliminate it, or pause it or something like that, and not just continue on. I mean, I think it shouldn't be left necessarily to the discretion of, oh, we don't need 10% this year. I mean, that's a lot for some homeowners to see, a 10% increase on part of their property tax. So I'm concerned about that.
We do have the option to include a cap if we would like to do that. It's kind of not the default position, because to protect the city in the event of sustained high CPI increases, but we could have it be 4% or CPI capped at 6% or 7%. I mean, we could establish a cap if the council would like to do that.
That's just my concern. I'm thinking, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the new resident that comes in here after this has been approved and implemented. That here's another line item on my tax bill, and now I've been paying $500 a month, and all of a sudden there's a 10% inflation. All of a sudden it jumps up. That would I hate to be the city council that get all those phone calls when that happens. So that's my concern. If some way we can address that. I don't know what the other council members their concerns, or if that's a concern at all. But that's one thing other than that, I understand. I support it. It certainly does not impact our existing residents at all. So it's a benefit to those that are living here now. And it is a minimum amount for the future residents that would give them enjoy the public safety that we enjoy now. But my concern is then, if it goes up to 11, 12%, here it was, just a couple of years ago was 9% inflation here in Inland Empire. That's a hard pill to swallow when you're going to raise everyone's, rate by that. That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Temple, you're next up.
Yeah, if you want, I can add a little bit of color to that if you'd like.
Oh, that's great.
It is a decision that the council gets to make. I know, working with city staff, there was a reluctance even to increase that on maintenance services, which was acceptable. It was a greater of CPI or 2%, and we didn't go to the 10. So there's prudence that's exercised, obviously, but what that does is it just allows for that maximum to increase. Doesn't mean that you levy that amount, that maximum amount. So that's where, even though the maximum could increase, and as Travis mentioned, you could have 7 years in a row of 8% public safety cost increases, and then how you can balance that, right? But even though the max goes up, we're only increasing it by 4% each year. So you still have the capacity to catch up in the future. So that's where, you have the give and take, and then it becomes a decision of the council every year.
There's be some analysis done each year that's saying, here's what our anticipated public safety costs are over our baseline, and this is how much revenue we anticipate. So therefore, this is how much we should increase, whether we stay at 2%, 4%, or whatever, to levy these taxes. I think that would, to me, give a lot of comfort knowing that we're just not doing it and and storing money away, but actually meeting the needs of the city without overcharging our residents.
Thank you. Councilmember Temple.
Yeah, Shane or Travis. So first of all, where it does not increase the overall maximum property tax rate of 2%, we're just carving out a portion of that 2% instead of for the developers. We're taking that for this purpose, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I actually really appreciate what Dean said. Nothing's more permanent than a temporary tax. And, I don't want to be that city where we vote for something that we hope one day we may either eliminate or lower or keep the same, and we come to accept the fact that we have this money and we keep using it, and one day we'll ask for more. I don't like that, and I don't accept it. I do appreciate this very much and am in favor of it. But I would appreciate a regular reassessment to see where we fall, how we're spending the money, and perhaps one day as we get the economic development corridors producing and doing what they ought to do, this is something that we could either decrease or eliminate. But I am in favor of it as you've written it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Diedrich, do you have any comment?
I would just reiterate that, again, I think we all agree public safety is one of our highest concerns. I appreciate the fact that it's not increasing the property tax bill. I mean, aside from the potential future increases, which would happen even if it was the other bond, right? Not necessarily as high. So I am definitely in favor of this because I think it serves a dual benefit that front. I do agree that I think the future city councils should be presented the data to make an educated analysis as to how to deal with it, any potential future increases or reductions, but I'm not necessarily in favor of instituting a cap that might hamstring them if they needed it for that.
Yes, my question was, I was going to ask Councilmember Dinas, but he wasn't here. Why did they say no in 2015?
They initially said yes, and then they didn't vote on the second reading of the ordinance. So
They didn't vote at all, or they voted no at the second reading?
They didn't vote at all. They didn't get a second on the second reading of the ordinance. It got through the public hearing favorable and went to the second reading of the ordinance and didn't get a second.
Do we know why?
Above my pay grade.
Fair enough.
I wasn't here at the time, but I understand there was pressure from developers.
That's what it would sound like to me. So is it possible to have a reviewable cap? I mean, nothing's permanent here, right? So anything can be reviewable. What is the ask that's being made of staff right now? What is the preferred ask from staff on this, as far as percentages go and caps and all that kind of stuff?
So the way the process is going to work is we'll get that project that'll come in, and then we'll be preparing a formation documents for the council consideration. In that, it's like the other CFDs that have been formed in the past, There will be a resolution of intention on consent, and then there will be a public hearing. The staff report's going to outline exactly what's being proposed. In that rate and method of apportionment, I'm presuming we'll go under the standard practices other agencies are implementing this public safety CFD, single-family, multifamily with the rates and an escalator. That escalator can be up for discussion and if acceptable, gets approved as part of the formation. Now that tax rate would be only implemented to those properties that annex into that CFD. In the future, in the event that, 3 years down and there's another development impact fee update analysis and we push the development out to 2050, we reevaluate, and if at that time we said, well, we're doing really well on our general fund and that we think that $425 is a better rate. So then we can reestablish a new tax CFD, public safety, with that reduced rate on new development. There's an adjustment from switching to a new CFD at those moments. But the other ultimate application is that whatever you set the tax rate doesn't mean you're levying at the full amount. So what we're talking about is we're saying the 525 will escalate the maximum tax, and if it's at 600, but you say we only still need 525, we only levied 525, but you have the ability in the future to go up to 600. So we're really not, restricting the opportunity in the future. We're just saying you have a ceiling, and then annually we'll review what the amount should be levied and make that decision and present it to council for approval.
Maybe my question wasn't clear because your answer to me wasn't clear, and either I'm not getting it or I'm not asking it right. So if the staff were to present us with a proposed ordinance right now, what is the language in there that staff is looking for? It says 525 per single family unit, 411 per unit, and it says subject to annual escalator greater of CPI or 4%. Is that the language that staff is asking for, or is that one of several ideas that are being presented to us?
For council, for recommendation to come back? Right now, it's proposed to include CPI or 4% unless council directs differently.
Okay, so that's, the ask is these amounts increased at a rate of the greater of CPI or 4%.
That's what would be proposed.
Okay, that's what I want to make. I want to make sure what it is that we're either adjusting or looking at or reviewing. Go ahead.
And if I could just clarify, when the CFD is set up, there's a document called the rate and method of apportionment, and that's where you establish these parameters. And that's a one-time thing that's adopted when the CFD is formed. And as Shane has talked about, you have this annual escalator. And every year, when you want to levy the amount for that CFD for that year, you come back to the council, you adopt the levy for that year. And that's where you have the option to go, well, under the rate and method of apportionment, it says our maximum rate is this, but we think we're good at this level. We want to keep it the same. And so it's sort of kind of concrete when you adopt the rate and method of apportionment, but your annual levy each year can be modified as long as it's below the maximum rate, because the RMA establishes the maximum rate for each year going out into the future.
So what did Murrieta do as an escalator?
I believe they did the same, 4%.
CPI or 4%?
CPI or 4%.
All right. Councilmember Dinas, you have a question?
Right, I know Travis kind of answered it, but I'm going to dig it back into my archive memory here of CFDs. Usually when you issue bonds and Shane does runs his magic and calculates everything for the annual, the payments of it to put on special tax rolls, that you take what the debt service is and and how much you collect from the property owners that to meet that debt service payment. And it's only if you lack, the levy is insufficient to you, then you go to the special tax and increase that amount to pay for the debt service. So it sounds like this is kind of what we're going to do with this CFD, is you look at what the costs are, what you get the $525 on whatever percent that is, and then if it's not enough to cover the difference, then you'll have to go above the 4% or start approaching the CPI then to make sure you get levy enough to pay for the public service difference that we have. I mean, I don't know, it makes sense to me a lot, but
Well, from my standpoint, did you want to respond to that, or was there anything that?
I'm sorry, I had to look, I clarified, Marietta's at a flat 4%.
So they didn't do the CPI, they went flat 4%.
They went flat 4%.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. You know, something you said resonated with me, that, you know, we don't want to impose a new tax on the residents, but the new residents are causing us an increase in the services. I mean, we can't provide, if we go to 175,000 people without affording the cost of it, we would have to hold off on that development until economic development catches up. But economic development won't come in unless the rooftops are there. So it's kind of a...
in the state's mad at us for not putting enough houses.
Right, we need more housing. So it would seem like the new development drives the need for more public safety. We're going to need more fire coverage. We're going to need all those kinds of, all those people with pets, animal control, that kind of thing. I do get scared about CPI as well. What I would be inclined to implement this with a straight 4% like Marietta did. When I was thinking, the reason I asked, I was thinking it in my head. I want to make sure that I wasn't being completely way off base financially. I can't believe Lori Stone voted for this. That had to have gone 4-1 that way. No, it went 5-0? Crazy. But I would like some sort of language in it that makes it a prominent question each time the budget comes in. Like, because this seems like it's the type of thing that I wouldn't want future city council members to just roll it into the big giant stack of stuff to consider. I would want, at least for the time being, for people to look at it individually and just go, oh yeah, that's right, we're going to look at this each time to see if we need to keep doing it or not.
Well, I mean, if you increase the rate over 4%, because CPI is higher, I think the way to ensure that the council understands that it has to come back for approval from the council before they make that increase.
You do have to go to council each year to have the council approve the levy that we send to the county. So it could be a part of that report when you adopt that levy, that there's an analysis that fee is justified and within the maximum parameters.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Do we have any other questions or comments from council? Do you need a vote from us, or is there direction? It seems like we're all in consensus here. It seems like a pretty clear message.
Yeah, I think it's plenty clear, Mayor.
Okay. Then I think we've got it. Well done. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Well, with that was the only thing on our special agenda item. So at 4:47, we are adjourned.